I need to like break this up a little bit, like maybe speak once in the morning, once in the afternoon. I know I put it together. I don't know what I was thinking. I did move it around numerous times. So, all right, so we're going to end on internal controls. We're going to do it a little bit different. We present on internal controls all the time because they are extremely important to how your office operates. We're going to briefly go over them, and then we're going to talk about certifications because that's really something that we look at when we come into audit. So, internal controls, what are they? You might know what they are. Can you recite the definition without me putting up the next slide? Can you really? Because I really want you to. I believe she can because she remembers all the statutes and all of that. I need a computer. I can find it. I just don't have it memorized. Okay, so this is going to be your 5-minute internal control update that you guys have heard over and over again, but the definition. So internal control is the process by which management structures an organization to provide assurance that an entity operates effectively and efficiently, has reliable financial reporting system, and complies with applicable laws and regulations. I always come back to this with internal controls because it kind of tells you everything you need to know. I feel, this definition is all about how you're operating, how you're reporting, and whether or not you comply. The purpose of it, to combat fraud and mistakes by preventing opportunity, detecting fraud, errors, and omissions. I know I think sometimes when we talk about internal controls, fraud becomes like the number one thing that we talk about. And it's not just fraud. It is human error. I mean, you're entering stuff into your system. I don't know about you, but I have switched numbers around from time to time and can't get something to work. And it takes, maybe a break or somebody else to look at it and say, oh, you've messed up there, or you got those backwards. That's what your internal control is too. It is to catch all those things. Have somebody look over it. Make sure that what you're reporting is accurate. What you're posting is correct. The 5 components of internal control. So control environment. This is tone at the top. So the ethical atmosphere created in the office and the county overall. Sorry, I got my heel caught in a cord. All right, so risk assessment. What's the risk? I mean, where is it? Where's the risk that the process will go wrong? Where's the risk that the information's incorrect? Mistakes will occur. Fraud. You have to assess those in everything that you do. What is the risk? Control activities, your policies and procedures, how the office is running, processes such as your claims process, your AFR process. Information and communication. This should be reliable and relevant. So accuracy of your information, whether it comes from an internal or an external source. And then monitoring activities. So basically a review is the way I like to think about it. Is everything working properly? If yes, then you look at some adjustments that may need to be made. You'd always be tweaking it a little bit. If it's not, then maybe you're looking at it and it says, you know what, this isn't working properly. Then you need to communicate it timely to those who are involved. The sooner you're aware of an error, the sooner that you can fix it. Okay, and keep in mind, internal controls are designed and implemented by management. So, in your office, who's management? Who's management? Thank you. You are. Okay, you can call Lori and I again. I mean, I like internal controls. I don't know that I like sleep with them at my bedside table, but I shouldn't I? I think that they are very important. And so you can call Lori and I. We've said that numerous times. And we just keep trying to tell you, we can't just, design them for you because your office works differently than your office and your office works differently than your office. So we need to take in consideration all those factors. But we can, if you want to say, hey, this is something that we're thinking of, do you think this would work? Bounce that off of us, always. Again, these are kind of, I was thinking when you were doing yours on your preparation plans, it's a living document. This is a living document. Your internal controls should always be evolving, always. What controls you had in place way back when it was all paper ledgers, obviously would not work in a world today where it's computerized, right? If you're switching softwares, probably need to take a look because what may work for one may not work for another. You have new employees that come in. Maybe somebody takes on extra duties. Really, any kinds of changes should be evaluated to determine if the controls that were in place are working or if they need to be tweaked a little bit. So again, it's always always evolving. And the number one thing with internal controls that we like to think of is segregation of duties. What does segregation of duties mean? Now, you all just walked down a bunch of stairs. I know you're awake. Right, more than one person. So you segregate the duties, right? And my favorite thing to say about internal controls, I said this back when I was a field examiner and would audit, is document, document, document. You'll hear me say it every single time I get up here and talk about internal controls. You have to document what you're doing. You can tell me you reviewed something, but if I came in as an auditor and you say, well, yeah, I looked at it, and I can't see anything that says that you looked at it, whether it's an email, heck, I guess it could even be a text message if you will pull it up on your phone. Look, on October 5th, I said it was okay. Some kind of documentation that shows that you have internal controls and that they're working properly. So that's what we're looking for is documentation. It does not always have to be a signature or initials, though I think sometimes that ends up being the easiest. It can be what works for you. So if it's a stamp, if it's an email, again, if it's a text message, I don't know, you can get really creative with these. All right. That is my internal control spiel on what they are. Yay, it's over. Okay. What I really kind of want to focus on, and sorry, a panel's in the way again. There we go. Is the certifications. And I wanted to work on this certification statute. It's the end of the day. So 511-127. Has anybody read this one? Anybody know it? Everybody's familiar with it? Okay. All right. So I did not put the whole statute in here because it is huge, but I did put portions of it. So I stuck this statute in, which is 511-127E. And this talks really that the State Board of Accounts shall define, and the audit committee shall approve an acceptable minimum level of internal control standards and internal control procedures. Okay, well, have you ever wondered how we did that? No? You guys don't care? That's fine. So this is before my time. Lori, did you work on this manual? Okay. See? Okay, so State Board of Accounts and Lori put out the internal control standards for Indiana public subdivisions. So when you hear us talk about the internal control manual, this is what we're talking about. I put the link here. This is what contains the acceptable minimum level of internal control standards so that we can meet statute. I was going to also state, just because I don't know that I've ever said this, but so the yellow book, which is the Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, or GAGAS, prohibits the State Board of Accounts from prescribing the actual internal control procedures to be used by a political subdivision. So if you're ever wondering why we can't, it says we can't. Okay. So if we go to 511-127F, It talks about that the State Board of Accounts shall develop and designate approved personnel training materials as approved by the Audit Committee to implement this section. Okay, so anybody know what kind of trainings we've put out there? Heard a video. Yep, video. Anything else? Well, so we do provide trainings at annual conferences on this. We do have that internal control webinar, which is on our webpage as well, so you can watch that. We've also got some links on our page. So COSO, which is the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, they have an internal control guidance. They are kind of known as the go-to people when it comes to internal control standards. I think that's just where we all look. I mean, that's just, that's where it's set. The bar is set. GAO also has standards for internal control in the federal government. So these are just good resources to take a look at, see, they can help you in developing your internal controls. And GAO is the Government Accountability Office. So, and those standards are what we refer as the Green Book, just in case you want some extra knowledge. Okay. So 511-127G talks about that the legislative body of a political subdivision shall ensure that 1, internal control standards and procedures developed under subsection E are adopted. Okay, so the ones that we put together are the minimum level that we said is what needs to be adopted, and that personnel receive training concerning the internal control standards and procedures that have been adopted. Okay, so the fiscal officer of each political subdivision shall certify in writing the 2 things: the minimum internal control standards and procedures defined in this section were adopted, and that personnel who are not otherwise on leave status receive their training. Certification shall be filed with us at the time that you do your annual financial report. Anybody know where you do that at? What? In Gateway? Yeah. Is it a separate report? Do you know where it's done inside Gateway? It's in the questions. Yeah. So at the time of your submission, it's kind of at the very bottom, I think. I can't promise it's going to stay there because I think we're adding some questions, but we do ask you. We ask you to certify that you've adopted them, and we ask you to certify that your personnel have received the training there. We do audit this. So if you say yes, well, we're going to look and see. And if you haven't done it, comments can happen. So this is where you certify it. So my question is, who requires training? Anybody know? What? Let's go with 511-127C. Okay. So I think this is kind of really, this is really important to know that, so personnel, according to statute, this means an officer or an employee of a political subdivision whose official duties include receiving, processing, depositing, dispersing, or otherwise having access to funds. Okay. So election time's coming up and I have a poll worker. Is the poll worker required to have internal control certification? Why? Thank you. Right. Okay. Maintenance staff may not. I can't imagine that they're taking money. I was trying to think, would there be a reason that they would take money? I can't think of one. What? Might empty the Coke machine? Election fraud? Is that what you highway workers, those that are out working on the roads, who aren't, that their whole job is, construction or reconstruction or preservation. We'll talk about that tomorrow. See how I tied that together? Okay. So we get a lot of questions on this because I think that gets confusing. We think that we have to, anybody that comes into employment, we think that they require this certification and they don't. So I wanted to kind of point that out. Again, I like this statute in particular just because it really defines who is required to actually get the certification. Okay, so certification, we put a form up. It's kind of, I think, right underneath the video. I think there's a link to it. It looks like this. These are going to be filled out by any elected official, appointee, or employee that meets the definition of personnel. Again, I put the link right there. These are maintained on site, so you're not going to submit these to anybody. You just need to keep a file of it. It's something we're going to review during every single audit. We're going to look to see if, anybody you hired within that audit year that meets the definition of personnel has gotten that required training. So we're looking at that along with what you've certified through your AFR. Okay. So audit results. Sometimes statute tells us what we have to do, doesn't it? All right. So in 511-127I, this states that if the State Board of Accounts finds during an audit of a political subdivision that either the political subdivision has not adopted an internal control standards or procedure required under subsection G1, or personnel of the political subdivision have not received the training required under subsection G2, the State Board of Accounts shall issue a comment in its examination report for the political subdivision. So it's important. Please do it. Okay. This one I might get done really quick. We should just go back to the ARPA funds. We'll just go back now. Okay. So a couple things I want you to consider with your internal controls as we're going through this. One person should not, again, be responsible for, any process. No one knowing how to perform it. So sometimes we get employees in who have been there for 20 years. They're really good at what they do, but nobody else knows how to do what they're doing. They get sick with COVID, or they decide they're going to retire. That can be problematic. So we've talked about cross-training before, but it's also internal controls. Everybody, there should be somebody who knows how to do what everybody, that's not how I want to say that. Not one person should only know how to do it. Multiple people should be. There should be reviews in process. So no matter what process you have going on, somebody should be overseeing that to make sure that it's correct. Remote working, since we went to COVID's kind of come up. So think about this too, what people are doing at home, how those controls would need to be altered with them working at home, because that may change your process a little bit as well. And when they're working from home, are they taking records with them? There probably needs to be some sort of policy in place for any records they're taking with them. Are these confidential records? Should they be leaving the office? There's lots to consider there. I just want you guys to be thinking about those things. And then I want to talk about the fraud attempts. So we talked about CARES and we talked about the ARPA. It's a lot of money funneling into you guys, a ton. The amount of fraud that is trying to happen, you heard Jillian speaking earlier, it is just skyrocketing. I mean, they are trying every which way, and they're succeeding in some, whether it's an email to, hey, I need to switch my payroll, and it's not the person, So be vigilant, be leery of anything that you are not expecting, question everything. Even question some of the stuff that you receive from us. So we send out through we call it eGov deliveries. Everybody know what I'm talking about? It's a pretty little blue form. It's kind of standardized. It wasn't ours, but it was one of the other directors had sent something out and somebody grabbed it and spoofed it. and put something in and sent it out. Now it was caught because the email address was different than what would have been from us. But if you even get something from us and you think something about it doesn't look right, email me. Okay. And I will be more than happy to say, yes, I sent that, or no, I did not. Okay. But I do want you guys just to be kind of vigilant of that. We're just seeing more and more of that. Fraudulent checks are the other big one. I think I've seen more of that, more with your clerks and things, but it may end up picking up on your end as well. And then basically giving any kind of like confidential information over the phone. Really think twice before you give anything, because you have no way to verify who that is you're talking to. One of the last things is resources. Before Stephanie retired, I miss Stephanie. But before she retired, she did this really handy thing, these best practices checklists. This is not a requirement. We just thought it would be a great place to have information, ask questions, to look at. I just put a few of them on here. There is the website or the link, and there's like 11, maybe not all apply to you. But there's a long form, there's a short form. So depending on how involved you want to get with your internal controls, there are questions to ask into the 5 components of internal control to help you design. They're really kind of neat PDF forms. You can download them and you can actually click on them and save them to your computer. If you just click on them when you open them and then you close them, they don't save. Just as an FYI. But they are really a handy resource to use as you're developing your internal controls. And that's all I got. Look at you. You're very excited. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, look.
I know this, excuse me, I know the state can be late relative to private industry in dealing with such matters. So what's the origin or genesis, probably a Lori question, of formal adoption and looking at these at the county level or units of local government of internal controls 20 years ago when this started coming in? You may not have been here this long. I don't know, Lori.
I will be honest, when I came on the department in the early 2000s, because I'm not going to tell you all my age, we didn't really look at internal controls. I mean, it was talked about, people talked about it, but it wasn't something that we did a lot of audit work.
You didn't have any, so we just put it at high.
And went on. But when I came back in, when did I come back? 2014, it was already like really ingrained in us. And we were looking at everything.
We started looking at it as an audit agency before it became law for you to have
Right.
internal controls in place.
So especially with federal grants, because they require it. So we are required to audit your internal controls with federal grants. So that's kind of, I think, the starting point, and it just kind of flowed in. Whether the time frame, I'm not sure. I would probably say like early 2000s to late 2000s, right around there. That 10-year window, maybe. Is that helpful?